What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time, my name is Chico Moya, and this is the best channel on YouTube. So I am currently living in Finland, and I've been living here for around 5 years now. And one of the biggest things I noticed when I moved here was really simple, coming from South Africa. And it was the fact that I hardly saw people living on the streets. Like, of course, there are like these drunk people that stumble across the streets and all that sort of stuff. But in terms of like just encampments on the side of the street and stuff, I just haven't seen it here. And I want to react to a video about homelessness in Finland because something I've noticed about this country is the fact that it has done so many things really right. And I find it baffling that I hear a lot of people still complaining about stuff. And I'm not saying you can't complain, but at the very least, if you complain about something, you need to hold it within context, right? And Finland has done a great job in taking care of its people. The welfare system here is amazing. And I have never understood how they sorted out homelessness, or at least how it's handled. And I can imagine that it would be, if you lived on the street here in Finland, especially in winter, you would probably die. It's really freaking cold. So I'm really interested in getting into this. So without further ado, I'm going to react to this. It's my first time watching this. It's called How Finland Found a Solution to Homelessness.
Homelessness is often considered a problem that doesn't have a solution. But there is one country that may have found it anyway. Finland has developed a unique strategy for getting homeless people off the streets and back into the society, and it aims to completely eradicate homelessness by 2027. And although Japan still has technically the lowest homelessness rate, the Japanese success is actually quite questionable, while Finland has been praised again and again for its results. So how did Finland manage to do it? And why aren't we just doing the same thing everywhere else? This is how Finland solved homelessness. But first,
I want like seeing footage of Helsinki like that. Just, it reminds me how beautiful this place actually is. It's actually quite an amazing city living here. Yes, it gets cold and dark and all that good stuff, but it's still awesome.
Finland is famously the only country in the European Union where numbers of homeless people are actually significantly decreasing, and have been for several decades. And it's not like other European countries are not trying. They all have shelters, organizations giving out aid, and dedicated national strategies. But most of them, including the UK, Germany, or France, still see their numbers going up rather than going down. So what is Finland doing differently? Well, as they say, if you want average results, do the same thing as everyone else. And if you want unique results, you have to use unique methods as well. And so the Finns have turned the traditional approach to homelessness on its head. And
before I continue, I want to try and make a little bit of a prediction. I haven't looked into how homelessness becomes a pandemic, but if I were to hedge my guess, obviously there's income inequality. Maybe some people just can't afford to live and afford an apartment and things like that. Then there's obviously, I'd say mental health should be another aspect that plays into this. What else causes homelessness? I guess I did mention poverty, lack of opportunity, perhaps. Yeah, I'm very uneducated on this topic, so let's see what Finland has done to change things.
Committed to a radical strategy that became known as housing first. Basically, there is usually a reason why someone ends up homeless, whether it's because of mental illness, drug addiction, because they lost their job, or something else. But the idea behind how most countries approach homelessness is that the person living on the street should start by sorting out those problems first.
I wasn't wrong. Look at me being like a super genius out here. So, housing first.
while living in a shelter, and only after that, they can get access to permanent housing. This has been called the staircase approach, because the homeless person is basically expected to gradually move up through different levels. They are expected to stop taking drugs, undergo mental health treatments, and if they make progress, they can move on, with the permanent housing as a final reward. But the problem is that this approach is not actually very effective. Quitting drugs or managing serious mental health issues is already difficult when you have a home, and it's basically impossible when you're homeless. In other words, we expect people living on the street to do what many regular people are not able to, and so it's not surprising that most homeless people get stuck on one level of the staircase, as they
Oh, that's actually really interesting. So, there's different levels that you have to get to before you get permanent housing in a lot of other places. But to be fair, like if I'm living on the street and drugs and alcohol are my way out, I would definitely do that. Because unless you have to be a certain type of person with like an absolute vision, but if you are actually in crisis mentally and emotionally, I can imagine that you would just get stuck in using substances to, I guess, mentally get taken to another plane, right? If you are enjoying this video, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like on this video. It honestly really helps. I'm trying to get those numbers up and to start doing this a little bit more full time. But if you want to support me in other ways, you're welcome to buy some merch. I've got a bunch of stuff just at the bottom there. It's incredibly helpful and I appreciate it.
as they fail to complete the tasks to move on, and eventually they relapse, get evicted, and go back to the street. So Finland, seeing that the traditional approach was not very effective, decided to turn this on its head and try out something very different. Rather than thinking of housing as a reward for successfully integrating into the society, Finland based its approach on the idea that with a permanent home from the beginning, solving your own problems becomes much easier. And so the state started providing permanent housing in the form of small individual apartments, not as the final reward, but at the very beginning, and to basically any homeless person who asks for it, and without strict conditions. People living in the housing provided by the state are not required to give up drugs or go to a treatment, and they're not evicted if they relapse. They are, however, required to pay a small rent, which means they need to have an income. And they have a very strong support system which they need to take part in. In most cases, the housing is provided in centers with around 100 homeless people living in small individual apartments that are looked after by a team of around 20 on-site social workers. And
man, that's just so wholesome. I love that. I genuinely do, and I love this country for it. I love that approach because it's like once you've got a place where you can call home, you're given a little bit of responsibility, then it seems like you've got a good foundation to be able to start making little changes in your life. Like we sort out the most important traumatic thing, which is living on the street. Before I moved to Finland, there was a small time, like a couple weeks, where I had to let go of the place I was staying at and I had to stay with friends and then stay with my parents for a little bit. And that feeling of not having a place to call home, even for me, it felt incredibly uncomfortable. Like it felt strange. I looked at my bags and I was like, yo, this is everything I own in this world, right? And in the apartment I'm living in now, it's quite expensive, I guess, but like I am happy to pay for this place because in a way, it represents who I am. And it's a place where I can take all my worldly possessions and have them here. And it makes me feel comfortable. It makes me feel like I belong somewhere. So that actually makes so much sense, right? Or am I tripping? Like this This makes a lot of sense, but I'm getting ahead of myself.
They provide support with everything from bureaucracy, job hunting, and getting access to addiction or mental health treatments, and they also keep things from going off the rails. But how it works is one thing, and if it works is another one. So does it? Well, in the mid-1980s, there were around 20,000 homeless people in Finland, and according to national estimates, in 2021, this figure has decreased to just under 4,000. And so it looks like a success, but is it really? The critic—
Wait, is this 4,000 in the whole of Finland, or is it just Helsinki? If it's the whole of Finland, that is crazy. How many homeless people in America? Let's see. 653,000, but to 300 million. And in Finland, it's 4,000 to around 5.5, 6 million. I'm not even going to try and work out that percentage, but 4,000 out of almost 6 million is amazing. That's really fantastic.
Critics of the Finnish system say that this just hides the problem, and the numbers are artificially decreased by putting everyone in government-paid housing, rather than actually reintegrating them into the society. And that is a legitimate criticism. The results are only possible because of the continuous support paid for by the state. The numbers of those who transition from government housing to living completely independently are quite small, and if you would remove the government support, the homelessness numbers would immediately spike once again. But on the other hand, that's the whole point of the policy. You don't need homeless people to turn into model citizens who are addiction-free and who are completely independent. In the Finnish model, it's already considered a success when you get them off the street and into a controlled, safe environment, when they're able to pay a small rent every month, and when they're slowly, one step at a time, reintegrating back into the society. Now, naturally, this costs a lot of money. The Finnish government spends a lot of money on buying apartments and turning them into homeless housing, subsidizing developers who build this housing, heavily subsidizing the rent, and employing a lot of social workers that work with the homeless people. And
that's an interesting way of looking at it, because I guess some people could just look really negatively at the system, like, hey, you're artificially inflating the numbers, making it seem as if a lot of people are not off the streets and whatever. But I think another way of looking at this is, you know, when you look at places in America, for example, say in California, or say in LA or in San Francisco, where you see videos of a lot of people just sleeping on the side of the street and whatever. I feel like that has such a negative impact on let's just say it makes the area look really terrible. And by making the area look terrible, maybe businesses won't want to be there. And if there's a bunch of homeless people staying in one area, maybe that could inflate crime. It could make people more desperate, and I guess it just makes everything worse. And over the long run, you'll probably find that the state or the country will have to pay more money in like trying to enforce the law with police officers, trying to police certain areas, I guess. Maybe people actually dying from hypothermia and all that kind of stuff. And it just makes everything look terrible. But having people have their own places, and of course not being perfect human beings, still battling and whatever. But I think that's a good place to start, at least from the way I see it. I would much prefer not seeing people on the street, not simply because of the aesthetics, obviously, but because they are human beings, and the idea of people sleeping on the streets is crazy. And the fact that I pay taxes and stuff and it's going to things like this, I actually don't mind it, because it feels a lot safer. You know, in South Africa, one of the things was that in certain areas and places, there's so many people living on the street that, you know, you can feel incredibly unsafe. And some of these people are drugged up and dangerous, or, you know, in a really desperate situation. So I would much prefer this.
That's not cheap. But even so, according to Finnish statistics, it actually financially pays off. A study of financial costs shows that Finland actually saves 15,000 euros a year on every homeless person it houses. Even though it spends money on housing and social workers, it's still a lot cheaper than to bear the cost of emergency care, policing, justice system, and all the costs that come with having homeless people living on the street.
Yo, I genuinely haven't watched this. This is my first time watching this, so I feel like my predictions have been pretty spot on right now. Anyway, I just wanted to take a moment to brag about that.
And so in the end, it's a model that kind of works for everyone. It's definitely better for the homeless people who don't have to live on the street or in often dangerous temporary shelters. It's better for the regular people who don't have to deal with criminality, drug use, and other issues that come with people living on the street. And it's actually better even for the government that ends up saving money. But if it works in Finland, why aren't we doing it everywhere? And would it be successful? Well, that's a tricky question. And there are both practical and ideological reasons why Finland is still unique in this approach.
I guess the first thing would be is the welfare system here in Finland, right? It's a big part of the culture here. You pay a lot of taxes, but the reward you get for paying a lot of taxes are some of these programs. And so I don't know that other countries will be able to do the same thing if they don't have a system like that.
First, even if you wanted to, it's not actually that easy to just take what Finland is doing and apply it somewhere else. For example, the basic condition to give away housing is that you need to have enough of it. And since most countries are going through a housing crisis, that's not that easy. One of the reasons why Finland is able to do it is because cities in Finland tend to own most of the land. And so they're able to use that to build a lot of social housing units. But that's not common. And so even though this policy is successful in Finland, it can fail in other places. California, for example, has been trying the housing first policy as well for the past 10 years, but it hasn't really seen the same results. And that's because it lacks everything that is required for this policy to be successful. Unlike Finland, California has incredibly strict development rules and really expensive real estate, which means that building social housing in large quantities is kind of impossible. And even then, housing is just a part of it. In order to replicate how it works in Finland, you also need a really strong social security system, a lot of social workers, and access to healthcare, mental health institutions, and addiction treatment.
Yeah, that does make sense. And I don't know if it will mention it in this video, but I'm pretty sure Finland doesn't just demarcate an area and just put a whole bunch of homeless people in said area. They try and mix things up and try and integrate the housing with different types of people. I could be tripping. It may not be right, but I think that's probably a big part of it, because once you start creating just like, hey, this is just for homeless people or whatever, or just asylum seekers, blah, 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 and you create a whole area, I feel like it creates a different type of society in one area. But if you're trying your best to mix and match things, you are still trying to create a nice, healthy society, or at least a nice, healthy community of different types of people, which is a healthy thing for a country or a city.
But California doesn't really have any of that. But even more than for practical reasons, this policy is often rejected on ideological grounds. There is a deep-rooted idea that homeless people should deserve housing rather than just get it, and that doing so creates a bad precedent. Even though in this case, that's not really what the data and the evidence are telling us. So although Finland has some unique advantages, this model can be applied elsewhere. But in order to be successful, it requires a lot of invested resources, ability to commit for decades rather than for years, and in the end, it needs to be just a part of a wider, well-functioning system of social safety nets that help people from getting off the ground. And so it looks like Finland will probably keep its unique position for a bit longer.
In places like America as well, the ideological differences do play a role, because I do understand people saying that, hey, if you're homeless, there are certain things that you need to do to be able to earn housing and whatnot. I do understand that aspect where in America, it seems like there's a lot of ideological battles around, how much help can the government give? How much do you need to be able to earn yourself and all that sort of stuff? And it does make sense in certain aspects. But here in Finland, like they said, a lot of things here work very well because it's not just one thing. It's not just, hey, you're given free housing. It's also mental health and free healthcare and that sort of stuff. Workers coming to your place and helping you out. And I think together it creates this foundation that is able to take care of homelessness here in Finland. And it's quite incredible. And I won't lie, I can't tell you how grateful I am walking down the street and not having to deal with a bunch of homeless people just chilling there and making the place look terrible and putting themselves in danger. And so I think Finland has done an incredible job. Living here, something I've noticed is that to get yourself to a position where you're living on the streets in a country like this, it does have to be something extreme. It does have to be a mental health condition or a drug addiction or a personal choice. It's really impossible to be living here on the streets because you can't make any money. Like, number one, there's always ways to make some money. Heck, even washing dishes or whatever, there's a way to get work here. And number two, the government can step in and help you out. And it's just the beauty of the system here. And I can see and I understand why so many Finnish people can get really worked up over the social welfare system if it's being abused, because then if it's being abused, it means that money is just disappearing in the void and it's going to things that people don't believe that it should be going for or going to. So in this case, for me, if this video is accurate, I am genuinely blown away by this. I think this is a great thing, and there will always be people in whatever country, there will always be people who just don't perform as well or who find themselves in situations in life where they are overwhelmed and unable to do the normal, I guess, the normal things that everyone does, like not being homeless, right? But all in all, I think this is a great approach. I love the humanity of this approach. And I think that the effect of it is visible and it's great, at least from where I'm sitting. I would be against anyone who would want to change the system, at least here in Finland. And I am someone who believes that most of us do need to pick ourselves up from our bootstraps. We do need life is difficult for everyone, right? And we do need to learn how to handle life, It's just one of these things. But yeah, that's very cool. I hope you enjoyed this video. Once again, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel. And if you want to support me, you're welcome to buy some merch. But until next time, ciao.